So here we have an iPhone 6 that came in completely dead. Customer says it doesn't take a charge, it doesn't power on. So first thing we did is connect the DC power supply to the battery terminals on the logic board to determine if it had a short, which it does not. So we connected a charged up battery to see if it powers on, which it does, and everything seems to work. But it definitely does not charge. We've tried a couple new charge port flexes. That didn't solve the issue. So generally what we're seeing here is a common issue with iPhones. The TriStar IC is a little chip on the logic board that determines what's connected to the lightning port, and it reassigns the pinout for the lightning port logically depending on what's connected, be it a charger or a headset, any accessory basically. This chip fails all the time on the iPhones, and it's generally caused by the use of aftermarket, poor quality chargers that are unregulated, have poor filtering, and I'm not sure exactly what the mechanism is in that causes the TriStar IC to fail. However, we do replace quite a few of them. Now that I found my shields, I can cover the NAND up so we don't blow hot air at it. We can blow hot air at the NAND, it's not going to care. But why do that if you don't have to? So this little guy here is our TriStar IC. And you cannot see it because it's covered in this goop, which we have to scrape off before we try to desolder it. We don't really have to scrape it off to remove it from the board, but we want to not have this goop touching the components around the chip when we heat it up, because those little components are also going to want to move if they're attached in any way to the chip. So we just try to separate the chip from the components as much as possible, because it takes a lot longer to do this repair when you knock components off the board or blow them away and you have to try to find replacements from donor boards, and that's just a waste of time. So we try to make things as efficient as possible. And this chip is actually made of glass. It looks like a silicone chip because it does have a silicone top to it that you scrape off. I scrape it off before I remove the chip because it sort of insulates the heat from the chip itself, which is this little blue glass guy under here. Then we end up having to use more heat. And the rule, I guess, one of the rules when doing any board repair is you want to get the job done with as little heat as possible. And generally before we would scrape this silicone off, we want to have a look and see where the dot is, because the dot and the part number is printed on the silicone, as you can see with this Tigris IC here. But I don't need to do that because I already know where the dot goes, and it's right here. Can't really see it because I scratched the crap out of it. So you just want to pick, get all this stuff off, so we can put the heat into the chip and not into everything else so much. So there's a few different ways that you can remove this chip. You can pull it out with the tweezers when it gets loose, or you can stick a blade under the corner and push up on it a little bit and just let it pop off the board like that when it's ready. And we still have quite a bit of goop here, which I usually call underfill. It's a more professional term. and we kind of had to get rid of as much as that as possible because it's really messy stuff. Wick. Where's the wick? Okay. So now we just want to soak up the excess solder on here left over by the old chip. And a lot of oh my goodness, my steam extractor is not on. A lot of technicians will tell you that you probably shouldn't take wick to the board because you risk scraping the pads off the board. But the thing is, I'm not scraping the board. As you'll see here, what I'm actually doing is I'm sweeping the board with the wick. So I'm not pushing down on the board with the iron. I'm pushing down on the wick with the iron and using the wick's bending ability as sort of a shock absorber to just gently press down on the pads and kind of sweep them when they become hot enough to make the solder on them shiny. So alright, clean enough. So now we can just add a little bit more flux. With the TriStar IC replacement, you generally don't need to worry about cleaning the excess underfill pieces that will remain here once you're done wicking the pads. Because if you add a little bit of flux, they just float away usually. And I try not to do any cleaning that I don't have to do because we want to touch the board as little as possible when we're doing this repair. Because the more you touch the board, the more chances things can go wrong. And we don't want things to go wrong because then we're doing more work than we have to. Where are my TriStar ICs? Those are diodes. I don't want a diode, I want a TriStar chip. Okay. So I'm probably going to be asked what airflow and what temperature I'm using to install this chip. And I'll just tell you, 360 degrees and an airflow of 3. But that will vary for you depending on the nozzle that you're using and the type of air station that you're using. So this nozzle is about the same size as the TriStar IC. But you can't tell because it's between a camera and the TV right now. But I do try to stick with a nozzle that's roughly the same size as the chip because that way we're not getting any hot spots on the chip or we're not heating up stuff outside the chip that we don't have to heat up. And there's two ways you can install this chip that relate to the airflow that you're going to use. And if you're very confident with the nozzle and air station that you have and you've done a lot of these installs, you'll probably know the correct airflow to use so you don't blow the chip away. And ideally, you would want to have enough airflow to effectively distribute the heat onto the chip without blowing it away. Now, if you're worried about blowing it away, you can hold it into place while you blow the air at it, but you have to have steady hands for that. What I do is I just use an airflow of 3 because I know that that's going to get the chip on the board without blowing it away. So I just position it on the pads and slowly move in with the heat. Once the chip nudges, you'll know that it's going into place. Once it nudges twice, that usually means it's ready to be tapped. And tapping it just confirms that everything has a solid connection. So I'll just let that cool down for a bit. We can get rid of this. And that's your TriStar IC install, ladies and gents. That's a good sound, and that's a good sign.